Today, we're diving into an inspiring story of transformation and perseverance. Our guest today started as the last pick in dodgeball and grew up feeling like she didn't belong in the athletic world. Fast forward to midlife, and she's now an accomplished athlete with a passion for obstacle course racing. We'll be exploring how she overcame childhood insecurities, tackled the midlife assassin, and found her stride in a challenging sport that tests mental and physical limits. If you've ever felt like it's too late to start something new or push your boundaries, then this episode is for you. Get ready to be inspired and motivated to take on new challenges, no matter your age. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and I'm the founder of The Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women just like you build lean, strong, healthy, capable bodies that they love for the rest of their lives. We have a great show for you today. Wendy Bounds is here and she's going to share her inspiring story from Sedentary to Superwoman in midlife. If you've ever wondered what it takes to become the strongest, fittest, best version of yourself after the age of 50, stick around, you're in the right place. This episode is brought to you by The Silver Edge. The Silver Edge is my online nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle coaching business catering to those of you over 50 who aren't ready to give up and buy into the common narrative of it's all downhill from here. At The Silver Edge, we take a health-first approach to working with our clients to help them build lean, strong, vital bodies that last. Look, there's no shortage of lose weight quick coaches and programs in the world, but here's the deal. You can either lose weight quickly or permanently. So if you're tired of losing and gaining the same weight over and over again, if you're tired of constantly dieting, if you have a poor relationship with food, exercise, and your body, then I invite you to book a call and see if our services are a perfect fit for you. The easiest way to do this is to head over to silveredgefitness.com and click on the coaching tab, or just shoot me an email at coach@silveredgefitness.com. Okay, let's get on with today's show. My guest today is Gwendolyn Bounds. Wendy is an award-winning journalist and author whose career spans influential media brands including The Wall Street Journal, ABC News, Consumer Reports, CNBC, just to name a few. She's also the author of the new book titled Not Too Late, The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age. Without further ado, let's meet Wendy.
As a little girl, oddly enough, given that I have written a book about a sport to some degree, I was not athletic. I was sort of the gangly, skinny kid who was last pick for sport teams. I remember cowering behind my best friend Louise during dodgeball because I was like so terrified of that big red ball like hitting me. You know, like I was a late developer, and I think I always knew there was something the world of sports could bring me. I was born a year before Title IX was passed, and so the young girls and the women I grew up with, like the ones who were athletes, they were idolized for it, right? They were strong, they were fit, they were some of the most popular girls, and I wanted to be part of that, but my body and I think my own sense of confidence never really matched that desire until, and we'll get into this later, until sort of I hit midlife. So yeah, I was more of a bookworm, a writer, and very insular person.
Okay, yeah, so that's obviously a long way and a long time ago and very far from where you are now.
Long time ago.
long time ago, yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me then, if it seems like in your book you talk about just the hell of dodgeball and being picked last or maybe next to last, right? And what that's like, and what does that do to your psyche? And there's clicks, right, at this age as we're coming up. And you mentioned, hey, I retreated to my writing and my books. So were you kind of in that bookworm nerd sort of clique, or how did that impact you being, seeing these girls that you kind of admired, but didn't feel like, how did you say it? I wanted to be a part of that, but I didn't feel like I was capable or worthy, perhaps. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I think these things that happen when you're young, you don't really realize how much they sit with you as you age, right? And I don't even think, Kevin, until I started really writing this book, and started digging kind of deep, did I kind of recognize how formative it was not to feel strong. I think anybody of any sex can feel that. Like my best friend is from the South, and he's now an amazing athlete, but he was also a skinny kid growing up, right? In a state, Georgia, where football was king, right? I grew up in North Carolina, and again, like soccer was very big in the state where I lived, and the best girls and the most popular girls, the ones always sort of invited to first to prom and homecoming, right? They were on the soccer team. And it's not that I was way on the outside, but I was never on the inside. But I think more importantly, I never felt strong physically. And that sticks with you. And I think in particular for women too, if you carry that sense of a lack of strength through adulthood, it carries with you when you're walking alone in a city street in the middle of the night, right? And you're flagging down a cab in the dark and you don't know if, you know, what it's going to be like when you can get into it and who's going to be driving the car and what could happen. And I think that manifests itself into other parts of our life, right? When you feel more physically strong, you feel more confident, period. It sounds quite easy to say, but how you speak up in a meeting at work, right? How you conduct yourself at a dinner party, right? All of those things, I don't think I realized how much athletics and physical strength might play into that. It didn't hurt my success career-wise necessarily, but this pivot I have made in the last 5 to 6 years now, embracing a sport, it's been profound. And that's part of why I wrote this book, is because people kept asking me about this change. And I wanted to have people have an easier time getting to where I've gotten than I did in the beginning.
Okay, yeah, and we're going to get there and pick all of that apart. I'm just fascinated by the impact that these younger years can have, and like you said, I think a lot of us, we don't realize we carry this as baggage throughout our life. I know for me personally, when I was also a scrawny kid, and when I looked at the cool kids, the jocks, kind of, and I did the exact opposite. I kind of rebelled, right? I hate them. I don't want to be like them. And so I went the other way, right? And turns out the stoner clique, they're open for you're welcome there. But it was this turning away from that, and for the longest time I carried this sort of idea in my head that being strong, being fit, being capable, being confident were negative traits and not positive traits. And it's only recently that I've unpacked some of that. And it's kind of funny when you're young and there's just so much change going on anyway. We're talking about the preteen, teen years. And it just seems to me that there's this basic human condition. We all want the same thing, right? We want to be loved. We want to fit in. We want to feel heard and seen and be accepted. And we each find our way there. And for the longest time, I held it against those kids, the cool kids, the popular kids, specifically the stronger, more athletic ones. And at first I rejected. I was like, I don't want to be that. And now looking back at it, it's a lot easier to say, well, that's what I did want. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to fit in. I just didn't have the vocabulary or the, I suppose, sense to understand that then. And what, in our teen years, that's a very complicated time anyway, but to be able to address those kinds of feelings of insecurity. But that insecurity, I mean, even today, I still find it kind of rearing its ugly head. Yeah. Is that an issue for you? Are you still kind of battling some of that? I'm not athletic, I'm not strong, or have you kind of, from where you're standing now, you've kind of conquered those demons?
So many interesting things to unpack. So first of all, the fact that you rejected it, fascinating to me, right? Like that's you sort of trying to have your own sense of control and power over it, right? By rejecting it. Yes. So that's a very natural thing that we do. I think too, hearing you talk, I have these, it's what neurologists call these flashbulb memories, right? These things that imprint upon you because they have such emotional resonance that your brain maintains them because they think they're going to have some importance later on. I remember the basketball game. My nickname in basketball was Bones, Bones, because I was so skinny. My coach gave me that name, so not exactly confidence building, but I never played. There was one game we were down by so much. She finally just let me into the game. And I was floundering around on the court, and this woman came down. I was about to shoot the ball. They came down, they hit my wrist. And I was sitting there and at the free throw line shooting, and I shot my first one and I missed. But then I had spent so much time alone in the back of the court by myself practicing shooting free throws because I wasn't allowed to scrimmage because I wasn't good enough that I hit my second one. And that feeling of when that second one went in, I never had the sense of my body actually doing what I asked it to in the moment. And so that has stuck with me to this day. And I'm going to get to your question about how I still feel about being an athlete and whether these flashbulb memories rear their head. That has stuck with me. And so I've raced now 50 races in obstacle course racing, which, for your listeners, viewers, it's a very popular sport. It's going to be part of the Olympics in 2028. Spartan race, they may know that brand of it, Tough Mudder, other races of that nature, but it combines endurance and running along with military style hunter-gatherer obstacles like scaling walls and climbing 17-foot ropes, carrying heavy objects up and down mountains. Every time I toe the line, Kevin, I still feel a little bit like an imposter, right? Like, I'm not an athlete. I don't deserve to be here, particularly if I push myself up to the front of the pack. And this is even after, again, 50 races, and I've been on the podium almost, I think, 19 times at this point in my age group. So should I still feel that? Should I not still feel that? I don't know, but I do.
Yeah, that imposter syndrome is quite interesting, and it creeps up in a bunch of different places, and it's that self-limiting belief that I think holds so many of us back. And look, it seems to me that that's very understandable when we're talking about being a kid or being a teenager or even a young adult, how those insecurities and that imposter syndrome can hold you back from achieving your actual potential. But don't you find it odd that there are those of us in our 50s, our 60s, that are still being held back by these limiting beliefs, by this sort of imposter syndrome? I think you said, and I've written it down here, a quote in your book that stood out to me is, how do we recast these limiting constructs of who we're not, right? And talk to us a little bit about overcoming, because it's easy to say, well, hey, I'm a grown-ass woman now, or I'm a grown-ass man, and of course I shouldn't have these limiting beliefs, and I can be whoever I want to be, but that's a whole lot easier for me to say than it is for me to actualize. How do we reach peak performance? How do we find our true, these are big questions here I'm laying on you, but how do we self-actualize? How do we realize our true potential when so many of us are held back by these limiting beliefs, by this imposter syndrome, etc.?
I've come to think of it as the competency trap, TRAP, competency trap. As we age, we start to believe, this is who I am, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at, and we lean into that, the things that we excel at, and we shy away from those we don't. And that trap is very limiting in many ways and not necessarily healthy for us from both a physical and a cognitive standpoint, right? I think some of the most important things we can do as adults is to put ourselves in situations where we are deeply uncomfortable, where we are outside of the confines of our own competencies and the things that we think we're good at, and we are willing to be a beginner again and to look foolish. One of the Stoic philosophers talked about how if you wish to improve in something, you have to be content to look foolish. When you're in middle age, you are not wired that way anymore, right?
That's
right. You are accustomed to sort of talking about the things that you're well versed in, and in work, you've got your lanes where you're strong. For me, I think one of the biggest messages that I have taken away from my own journey and that I like to talk with other people about is this notion of how you get out of this trap and this competency trap. And to my mind, we think they're things that we're not. Like, I'm not an artist. I'm not a fly fisherman. I'm not a singer. And maybe those are things you're not now, or maybe they're things you're not yet, right? And adding this word yet is a very powerful lever neurologically, cognitively, particularly as we age, to keep pushing limits. The psychologist Carol Dweck, who teaches at Stanford, she's a very well-known author, and she talks a lot about the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Growth mindset meaning you believe with hard work you can do and be something. A fixed mindset means you think, oh, I was just born with, you have to be born with skills to be good at something. But she talks about one Chicago school's unorthodox grading protocol where if students don't get a good grade, they don't get an F, they get a not yet. And I just love this notion of tacking the word yet onto things as we age and believing that there is still room and a path for us to become things that we aren't. even if we don't become the best at them, right? I think sometimes in this culture, it's like, well, I'm not going to be an elite athlete in the Olympics. So what's the point? I'm not going to be on Broadway. This isn't going to make, I'm not going to make a living. And I think we're really missing a key lever for our own health and well-being. And the science backs this up by not tackling some of these things that we wanted to be when we were younger. And people said, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm fascinated by stories of people in midlife and beyond reinventing themselves, second chapters, third chapters. But to your point, I love the idea of calling it what did you call it? A competency
trap.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
But we have to have this, we have to overcome, I suppose, this fear of failure, right? Mm-hmm. And I can remember the very first, you're going to be, I don't know, episode 300 of this podcast, something like that. But
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, but I can tell you, I was terrified.
Totally.
In my first dozen episodes, right? I mean, who was I to to start any podcast about anything, let alone health and wellness and all of this? And you have to overcome that. Look, you're going to suck when you start at anything to some degree, right? And you have to be willing to allow that to be, right? To look foolish and perhaps even to fail. And I just think that so many of us, and you alluded to this, so many of us fall into that trap of this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at. So we've defined these things for ourselves. And I think that there's some sort of maybe even entitlement by mid-age, right? Now I'm 50 and, my kids are out of the house. And so I've succeeded in that. I've been successful in my career. I've made money. I've paid off my mortgage. I've done all these things, and maybe I deserve not to have to, be crazy or do, to step outside of it. Maybe I deserve this comfort zone. But yeah, I feel like so many of us fall into that trap. What do you think it is that separates people who decide, especially in our stages of life, right, 50s and 60s, to consciously step out of that comfort zone? Because there is comfort and there's safety in being and with what is known and where you are. Is it the pain? What causes somebody to really step out and something like this?
It's a great question. I think not universally, but a lot of us are trapped in a cycle of sameness, right? Sure. The inertia takes over, the routines and the life and the infrastructure we've worked so hard to build, all the things, like there becomes a sort of repetitive nature to it. So how do you get out of that, as you're saying, right? How do you shake it up? Often there's a catalyst for people. Sometimes it can be a health scare. Sometimes it can be the death of someone they loved. For me, ironically, it happened at a dinner party where I overheard a man who was like well into drinking his gin ask a little girl who was there, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" She just started rattling off all these amazing things she might be. She might be a computer programmer at Apple, or a veterinarian. She loves animals, or she might be an artist because she drew. And you could see his eyes glaze over. He's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry I asked." But that conversation stuck with me, and it was like on a loop in my head the rest of the night, that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think that question was colliding with that cycle of sameness in my brain. And I woke up the next morning and I literally got out of bed, poured myself some coffee, and I Googled, typed into the Google search algorithm, what are the hardest things you can do? Kevin, I have no idea what made me type that. But that is that was the chemical reaction, the neurological reaction in my brain. And that is when the algorithm offered up, what are the hardest endurance challenges you can do? And that's where I discovered Spartan race and obstacle course racing. I started reading about it. I thought it sounded like the most insane thing I had ever heard of. And somewhere in my brain, I knew that's the thing I had to do because it was so hard. It was probably colliding with those flashbulb memories of when I was younger and hadn't been an athlete. And it took a long time, as you know, because you've read the book, for me to actually get started on my journey and get to where I am. But that was the catalyst in the moment. And I think for many people, there will likely be some pivotal moment that will get them to think, I need to make a change. Now, the question then becomes, what do you do after that, right? Because as you well know from all the people you've interviewed on your now, I think you said 300 show podcast, Really, change is about all the small, tiny decisions you make every day. It's not the one moment where you wake up and you Google what are the hardest things you can do. It's what you do every day after that and those hard decisions. And so I think I would add to your great question. One, what is it going to take for people to sort of shake themselves out of the cycle of sameness? But more importantly, what is it going to take to keep them on a journey to make that change? And those are some of the really interesting things you explore on this show and which I explore in my book, Not Too Late.
Yes, you do. Yeah, I talk a lot about the small steps and the journey, not the destination. I talk a lot about I believe the biggest indicator of success, really for anything, but in my lane, that's going to be health, fitness, wellness, is your ability to fall in love with the process. If somewhere along the line you can't fall in love with it, it's going to be really hard to maintain for the rest of your life. Because let's face it, what we're talking about, these kinds of changes, if you want to be healthy, strong, vital, capable for the rest of your life, you're going to have to change something for the rest of your life. And willpower, grit, determination, motivation, all wonderful things, by the way, especially to get started on this sort of a journey, isn't enough to maintain you, in my experience, over the long haul. Somewhere along the line, you're going to have to find that passion, which leads me to the question, what is it about you specifically? Do you feel like you have a personality that's maybe obsessive? Do you describe yourself as type A? What is it, do you think, that's about you that allowed you to latch onto this tenaciously and see it through to the level where you are now? Are you that type of person? I mean, somebody looking at you from the outside, would they say that about you? Oh yeah, I'm not surprised Wendy did that, because when she grabs a hold of something, she's like a pit bull. Or are family members and loved ones looking at you going, damn, all right, you go, girl. Didn't see that coming.
Yeah. So they definitely, and I think this would be accurate and fair. I'm certainly a type A personality, right? Somewhat been driven, particularly in my career field of choice in journalism and writing and media. I have never latched on to something, though, outside of my career, which has always been the A plot of my personal story, the way I did with obstacle racing. It's not as if there weren't things that I thought I might be interested in, Kevin, right? Like I had a moment where I mentioned fly fishing earlier. I had a moment where I thought, oh, fly fishing. I had a moment where I thought I'm going to really learn to improve my handwriting. I have no idea why I decided that. There was another moment where I was like sailing, but something really clicked with obstacle racing, right? So the forces had to come together. And I think we need to look at intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic is something where it comes from deep inside, some sort of emotional resonance. You and I have been talking a lot about childhood. I was intrinsically motivated by that. If I had just been extrinsically motivated by getting a finisher t-shirt or a finisher medal or just a great social media post, I would have run one race. I would have taken that t-shirt and put it in my drawer and it pulled it out on days when midlife felt bleak, but then it would have been over. But extrinsic I wasn't motivated by just getting that medal or that t-shirt. I was motivated by these intrinsic things. And I think that's really helpful for anyone who's getting started on a journey like this. I also, throughout my own path, and I describe this in the book so that people can do it better than I did, I started to learn what the edges and the equalizers would be for me as someone who was older to begin to master something hard and new. I had the perception that the journey of mastery was only for those who are young. I think I was somewhat, scarred by the 10,000 hours rule, right? That you have to put 10,000 hours into something if you want to become an expert.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is I found that it took a lot less than that, maybe half that time, to become very good on some days at something, and all of the sort of benefits that could bring. And that this is really important, that I don't necessarily have to reach that end goal of being the best. At age 52, I'm never going to be the best obstacle course racer if I ever had it in me physically to do it all, right? But there's a lot of upside every day when you wake up at this age and you can go out and do these things. And so that, to me, is more powerful in some ways than having reached the goal and then it's over, right?
Yeah.
Then you don't have that why when you wake up in the morning. And so I would say for anybody out there, what is the thing that you think you're going to think about when you go to sleep? It's going to make you want to get up earlier in the morning, or turn down a second glass of wine if you happen to drink alcohol, or turn off Netflix to get a good night's sleep so that you can get up and do that. Like, those are the things that will start to click inside of you. And when they do, you know you're on the right path.
Amen. That is beautifully, beautifully spoken. I love every last bit of that. And that goes back to kind of that's that passion. What's going to light your fire and keep you going in the long time? To your point, what gets a person up at 5 a.m. to go work out? That's, and most people's book, that doesn't sound fun, right?
Yeah.
What gets that person to make these sacrifices over the long haul for something that they love? All right. Well, I want to pick apart all kinds of things here when it comes to OCR and Spartan races. I want to talk about training and diet and recovery and getting started, all that fun stuff. But before we get there, you talk a lot in the book about the midlife assassin. And we've kind of danced around that here. We've addressed it a little bit. But let's talk, when you say the midlife assassin, what are you talking about, and what does that look like?
Yeah, it may look different for everybody, but this is how it looked for me. So when I started to write this book, I was searching online for a synonym for midlife, the word midlife. And these were some of the hardly inspiring results that popped up. Things like crisis or breakdown, the wrong side of 40, stressful, and my personal favorite, which was tube sock. I'm not sure why that
tube
came
socks,
up.
yeah.
Yeah, tube socks.
Yeah, if you're sporting those, you might be over the hill. Sure.
Yeah, I'm all right with a tube sock. You could rock a tube sock. But it began to feel to me, Kevin, like there was this, I began to visualize this stealth assassin sort of waiting up in the rafters of the concert hall where our life's composition is playing out. And this assassin bides its time through childhood and early adulthood while we're pursuing all these notes of new things. But it's in midlife when, as you and I were talking about, these routines fall into this cycle of sameness, same work routines, same friends, same restaurants, same chores, Monday slips to Friday, that the midlife assassin strikes. And we begin to feel that we're truly baked as humans. We stop seeking these new challenges and gravitate toward our competencies, hence the competency trap. And there's a risk of chronic boredom, which I'm sure, as you know from all your research, is a health hazard. It's been scientifically dubbed a health hazard associated with anxiety, depression, the risk of making mistakes. And we think that's just how it is at this age. That to me was what I felt like the midlife assassin was, that the midlife assassin was up there and was going to render this mindset on us of, I am fully baked.
Yeah, that sense of inevitability of it's all downhill from here, that my best is behind me, my prime is in the past. And
yeah,
I just turned 60, and I am on a personal mission to make my 60s my best decade in my life. Just to have all kinds of new firsts. And I think that it's because you're right. If people, when they hit, say, 40, that I think that's where that midlife assassin kind of starts to creep in, because it's about that time where that routine, you've probably reached some sort of level of success, as we view success in our culture, right? Which just, I've got a career, I'm managing a family, or whatever I'm doing, right? And it's that repetitiveness, Monday through Friday, it's that work grind, and then Saturday and Sunday, it's that little bit, I'm going to party, I'm going to, it's that break from the routine, and then right back at it. And we just settle into that. And I think there's also, again, going back to what I said earlier, I think there's almost, as we get into our 50s and 60s, well, this is my time to relax and to coast. I've worked so hard to get here. And so I'm fascinated by people like you who decide that, you know what, I'm going to reinvent myself. And I tell people all the time, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grow up until I was 50. And who knows, that may change several more times from here. So, all right. Yeah. So we have that kind of complacency and that routine. I think most of us out there can relate to that. And I think that also along with that comes the inevitable physical results from that as we become more sedentary. I read a statistic that said after the age of 30, 90% of people will never sprint all out again as long as they live. And that's pretty sobering. And it's because we don't have to. right?
Yeah.
We don't live
Yeah.
in a world where sprinting really is a daily necessity for life in any way, right? So as we're kids, of course, we sprint all the time. We're playing tag and we're running and we're enjoying this physical expression of our beings. But as we get older, we stop and we start to atrophy. So I'm sure you're very, very aware, and you talk in your book about sarcopenia and osteopenia and just this, all of the lifestyle diseases that come along with being sedentary. And I think so many of us feel that that's a part of aging. And look, aging is undefeated, a perfect record to date. But that sense of inevitability about this slow bodily decline has more to do, I think, with that mindset and the way we live our lives than it does with just physics or biology or physiology. Would you agree to that? I mean, you're obviously a pretty fit, healthy woman in your 50s. You want to talk a little bit about kind of thoughts there about reversing things like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and obesity and osteopenia, etc.?
First of all, I can only see you on a little box, but you look amazing for 60, so congratulations.
All right. I'm trying to normalize that this is what 60 should look. This should be the average, the baseline, not amazing.
Yes.
But yes, thank you.
You're the right person to host this show. I think I went into this sort of ignorant in the sense that I don't think I knew all of the forces that were coming for us at this age, but I also then didn't know what the potential upside of movement was either. And it was when I began interviewing experts for the book and weave that throughout the story to sort of help other people navigate their own journeys that I really learned about this. So you're not wrong, right? Once we hit our 30s, 40s, it becomes a lot harder, right? Our muscle mass will naturally start to decline. Our respiratory fitness will start to decline. Our hormones will make things very complicated. I've heard the doctor and the health author Peter Attia say you have to fight like hell to keep things sort of either both level or not to have that massive decline, to be able to do the things that you love when you're older. All of that is certainly true, right? However, what I didn't realize until talking to longevity and aging experts, including a man named Stephen Alstad, who's one of the country's foremost experts on aging, he explained to me that some of the newest scientific research actually shows that you can get these tremendous changes and you can have an upside as you age that we didn't think was possible. We used to think you had to start young. Not true necessarily, right? And one anecdote that really sticks with me when I was talking with Alex Hutchinson, the author of the book Endure, he told me about a large group of frail elderly people who were put on a 6-month strength training program. They were also given a protein supplement, but they put on 2.9 pounds of new muscle. Think about that. That's extraordinary, Kevin, yes, right? So if frail elderly people can do that, that is incredibly hopeful for the rest of us, right? That there is this opportunity for upside, so long as, and again, I'm going to emphasize this, you stick with it, right? You can lose that as fast as you can gain it. So you have to be committed to the daily work to get it done. I'll tell you my own experience is that, again, I have already shared with you and your great audience, like how skinny I was as a kid, and I'm still very lean, but I wasn't strong and I didn't have a lot of muscle mass. But between, I think it was age 51 and 52, I added, and they know this because they measured it in what's called a DEXA scan, where they can measure your bone density and your lean mass. I added 3.25 pounds of lean mass between, I think it was 2022 and 2023. And my doctor sort of like relooked at like she said, I'm going to tell everybody in my office to start obstacle course racing. So it can be done. I know it from both the experts I've talked to and from my own experience. And, your listeners are probably quite familiar with things like VO2 max, which is a measure of your respiratory fitness. I've had that measured in the labs. That has been improving for me. So I do think there's a real potential for upside that we didn't know existed and that science, importantly, backs up now, Kevin.
Yeah, there's a lot of science. What a great time to be alive, right? With all the technological advances and all the science on longevity. There's this whole muscle is the organ of longevity movement, kind of championed by, I don't know if you know Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, but she's amazing woman. She's been on the show here before as well.
Yep.
But there's this idea, there's this idea of muscle-centric medicine, again, kind of put forth by Dr. Lyon, but this idea that the more muscle mass we have, and like you said, we're not talking about becoming, in your case, a She-Hulk lady or anything like that.
Not exactly, no.
You're very fit,
Yeah.
you're very fit,
Yeah.
very strong, right?
Yeah.
But and I think a lot of women have this fear, especially in our age bracket, right? Because they were told when they were younger that Jane Fonda aerobics and little pink hand weights were appropriate workouts for them, where guys, it was okay to go into a gym and get sweaty and get strong. But yeah, being strong has so many carryovers into real life. There's the physiological and physics side of that, where if I have more muscle mass, then I can, that's a insulin uptake site, and I can better dispose of glucose, all that fun stuff. Mark Ripito tells us that strong people are harder to kill. And he, obviously we're harder to kill in a knife fight, but that's not so much what he's talking about as we're more likely to survive a fall. We're more likely to survive an illness. There's just so many health preserving and longevity properties to being strong. But there's that other side you kind of alluded to several times here that comes with doing difficult things, doing things you didn't think were possible, and just getting stronger, watching your body composition change, reaching new heights. And that's in that self-esteem and confidence realm, right? We become different people as a part of this journey. And I think that's part of the addiction to this, and part of why I'm so passionate about it is just, it's who I've become along this journey that is just, it's amazing to me. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago, and I won't be the same person 10 years from now that I am now. And I'm just infinitely fascinated with that story. And I love the idea that it's never too late to start. I mean, the best time, when's the best time to start strength training? When you're 20 or 30, sure, that's fine. The next best time is today. And the idea
absolutely.
that, why would I do that if it's too late? It's not, right? I mean, there are 70, 80, 90-year-old people that are actually putting on muscle mass. So I think that's very, very encouraging.
My parents are among them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they are now, my father's always been pretty active, my mother too, but they are now back with a personal trainer. My father even trained for a little bit with my coaches. I got my 76-year-old father to do a Spartan race with me, and he was amazing. And so it's not, I interviewed people who were in their 80s, a woman 83 nicknamed Muddy Mildred, who was the oldest person to run a Tough Mudder Spartan race. And she's,
I need to track her down and get her on the show.
Gray hair under the barbed wire. So 100%. And one quick thing you said, I was on a plane, Kevin, coming home recently from a trip, and the woman in the row behind me was struck. She couldn't get her suitcase into the overhead bin. It wasn't that big of a suitcase. And I went and I helped her, and she thanked me, and she said, it's always the worst part of traveling, putting your suitcase in the overhead bin. And it was just, that stuck with me so much that I just wanted to share that with you, because I think what you said about training ourselves to be fit for life. And I don't mean yes, you should be fit for your life, the length of it, but fit for life tasks. Can you lift your own bag without assistance? Can you go to Home Depot, get a bag of mulch and put it into your car without help? Are you going to be able to swing your grandkid between your legs? That's a far cry from saying, I want to have huge muscles and be a bodybuilder. That's just about being independent as you age. And for me, that's really what motivates me day in and day out. I mean, yes, these races motivate me because if I don't train, I'm going to suffer, but also these things about being fit for life. So I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, I love that. And it seems to me that fitness is this key. It's this life enlarger. As our health declines, our world shrinks. And as our health improves, that world expands. In other words, the possibilities are greater for, say, a 70-year-old like your parents that are capable of doing a Spartan race, or are capable of grabbing a bag of mulch from the ground and putting it on their shoulder and carrying it out to the car, or putting their overhead luggage up. I'm a big fan of that world getting larger as you get healthier. All right, well, Wendy, I want to geek out a little bit and talk about OCR Spartan race. I've got an admission here. I have been secretly fascinated. So just rewind a little bit. When I started, I've been a surfer all of my adult life, and that was primarily the only thing I did to stay fit as a young man. And then somewhere along the line, I did my first marathon without ever doing a 5K, running anything, any reason, any distance ever. A brother of mine talked me into it. We did a marathon and I was immediately hooked. There was something about that, the suffering and the finishing of that just really grabbed me. So for the longest time, I did marathons, I did triathlons, but at any rate, that was my introduction into being, trying to actually get better at something and do something really, really hard. And I have looked at I no longer do triathlons or really grueling endurance events now, but I'm fascinated by them. And I'm really fascinated with all the Tough Mudders and the Spartan races, and we say OCR, folks, we're talking about obstacle course racing. I've never done one. It might be after talking to you.
We're going to fix that.
Yeah, I know. I'm starting to get a little bit. I'm starting to get that itch. But tell people that aren't familiar with, say, a Spartan race, what I think most people have kind of an idea. Isn't that those crazy people that are like jumping over fires and they're crawling through mud under barbed wire or something like that? What is OCR? What's that all about?
Well, the answer is yes. We are the crazy people
Yes,
jumping
you
over
are.
fires and crawling under barbed wire. I'll speak to Spartan racing in particular because it's what I have done the most of. It's also the largest global franchise. They own Tough Mudder as well now. But it generally ranges from lengths such as a 5K to a 10K to a 21K up to an ultra, which I think is 50K. And they take place usually outside, often in terrain that can be either on farms or in mountains. I just got back from Big Bear in California. There's one in Vermont. Ski slopes are a very popular area, Lake Tahoe, all over the country, all over the world, actually. And you are running. So if you're doing a 5K, you're running faster. If you're doing a longer distance, it's a much more endurance type of race. But every so often you will come upon obstacles, right? So there can be like anywhere from 20 to 30 plus obstacles on a course. It might be something like getting over a simple 4-foot wall or a 6-foot wall, or in some races it's an 8-foot wall. It could be climbing a 17-foot rope. This took me a very long time to learn. It's not super easy to climb a 17-foot rope unless you're a little kid in the gym and somehow you just go up it like a monkey with your hands and feet. Carrying sandbags that weigh, for the women it's 40 and the men I think it's upward of 60, and buckets of rocks, monkey bars, swinging rings, and yes, throwing a spear and jumping over fire and crawling under barbed wire. All of these things, which I think to somebody who isn't familiar with sort of what you need to be able to do physically to accomplish them, they sound a little crazy. They look great. Like the social media photos are amazing. But the truth of the matter is, I've come to believe, and I'm biased, but I think the research shows that it may be one of the most perfect sports for us as we age because it forces you to double down on all of the skills that we need to be able to be fit for life. You need to have respiratory fitness, right? To be able to outrun something quickly if you needed to, but also to go a decent long distance if you had to, right? If your car broke down and somebody was hurt and you needed to run a bit for help, a couple of miles to get help. Grip strength. You know how important grip strength is as we age. It's something that you can actually, people say is one of the measurements of how well you're aging. Yeah. Could you hold if you fell from something, but can you get a top off of a jar? Grip strength is really critical. Muscle mass, like you have to build strength and muscle mass to be able to lift and carry these things, to get them over a sandbag over your head, to get your suitcase into the overhead bin. And then finally, mobility, right? Crawling under barbed wire, sure, right? It's not what we're doing every day, but to be able to get down into that kind of bear crawl, if you want, people can Google it to see what bear crawl is, but you're down on all fours. That's mobility. And so when I see an 83-year-old woman, like I mentioned, Muddy Mildred, down on all fours, she is mobile. She can get down if her dog's ball rolls under the bed or an earring or a notebook and she needs to get it. So I think obstacle course racing combines all of those things, and it's just so much fun. Like to get dirty and muddy, like I'll be racing and I'm a 52-year-old woman covered in mud on a Saturday morning. This is the greatest thing ever. So I am a bit of an evangelist for the sport, not only because I love it, but because as a journalist and a researcher, I have come to believe that the fundamental movements of it are so important for us as we age. You can find these in other sports, But this is why this sport to me was worthy of writing about in many ways.
It certainly does. It certainly checks the boxes for functional fitness, right? That term gets thrown around a lot, but I think it really, really applies to our demographic, right? And when you're describing these things, you're describing that we're actually hitting all of the primal movement patterns. So there's, I think, 7 basic primal movement patterns. Let's see if I can get them all here. It's squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, twist, and gait. If I'm not mistaken, that's 7. But the idea is that you have all of these movements. And so certainly as somebody who writes exercise programming, that's one of the considerations I'm taking into, that I'm factoring in as I'm writing out a program for somebody. Have I hit all 7 of those, right? Do I have somebody moving in all of these primal movement patterns? And clearly somebody doing something like you're describing is 100% doing all of those things in a bunch of different ways. And I could see how that would prepare somebody for ultimately healthy aging. Now, let's transition here a little bit. If somebody's kind of curious, like me, for example, or somebody who's maybe deconditioned, maybe starting from where you started, right? Because I think it's fair to say when you fell down this rabbit hole, you were not somebody who was strong fit. You would not have described yourself in that way at all, right? You were more in that other camp of, hey, I'm the midlife assassin has got me in the crosshairs here. What's our prescription? What do we do to get started if I want to start training to make myself maybe not the first across the finish line in something like this, but just to get across the finish line? Where do I start?
Yeah. I was nowhere close to the start to the front of the finish line, right? Or the front of the other racers when I started. I mean, honestly, Kevin, my one goal for my first race was to not die. Like that was my goal, because you have to sign a waiver that says that's a possibility. I don't want to make it sound that scary. I mean, we can get hurt just walking out our door. So I think there's a couple things I want to say. I want to start by saying don't make it too hard, right? In the beginning, I think I was so obsessed with like, what's the right watch and program and coach and like equipment that I need. And it just kind of overwhelmed my brain to the point where at some point I just gave up and started like fumbling around. And that was really helpful because I got out of the mindset of planning and thinking about it, and I got into the mindset of doing. Yeah. So I signed up for these free Spartan workouts of the day, and they would send me these emails. And there's many things both from Spartan and other places where you can get online free workout advice, right, to get started. I'm not saying there's not real benefit to having programmed, personalized programming from a coach. There certainly is, but that shouldn't stop you from a cost standpoint or a time standpoint in the beginning. And so for me, I was using these workouts of the day, and then I would get up 45 minutes early before work. I was the chief content officer at Consumer Reports at that time. And I would bleary-eyed Google on YouTube, what is a bear crawl? And then I would go out in my frozen backyard and like crawl around like some wounded animal learning it. But I was doing something, right? And I would get to work and I'd find I needed a second breakfast. And then I would go to the playgrounds and I would hang just straight from the kids' monkey bars. And then kids would start to teach me how to use the monkey bars. And it wasn't necessarily really formatted or regimented. And if you're somebody who needs that, there are many ways you can go with that. But I would say for the person who's worried about the initial time investment or organization, like to just start doing some things and to use the internet as your friend to begin to do those things, and to be very careful if you have injuries or things of that nature, so that you feel like you're actually participating in it, you're getting ready. And I suddenly at work, I would feel these little baby calluses emerging on my hands under the conference room table. And it felt like this secret when somebody was going on and blathering about an 83-page PowerPoint presentation, right? That would be like, I've got this other identity. And so that was very motivating. And that's why I'm mentioning it, because just by doing, you'll start to see some little changes. I think working on what you talked about, the fundamentals, your respiratory fitness. So whether it's fast walking or jogging, if you want to start with a 5K, can you start training yourself to run, 3.1 miles? 3.1 miles. That's one easy way to start. you don't need, again, you can go to any park and hang and build your grip strength. And you can also find anything in your home to carry, right? You could get a $4.98 bucket from Home Depot, those orange ones, or any other home improvement store. Fill it with rock salt or, rocks from around your property. You can carry that to build strength. Like, that's not that expensive to do. So working on both carrying heavy things, working on building your respiratory fitness through being able to run at least 3.1 miles, and working on your grip strength. Like, these can get you very far, along with some basic movements like push-ups. Pull-ups are very hard, I think, for women, but I have worked into them. You can start to add those. And sit-ups. Like, those are basics to get started. And I think you then go try a race. You try one of the non-competitive open heats. You get through it, you see how you like it, you have other people cheering you on. And then if it's for you, you can really start to formalize your training more. And I think taking it in steps like that without thinking, oh my God, I have to be this amazing athlete to go out and do this at all. Like, start with what's simple, cost effective, and most importantly, what you can fit into your life and do.
Yeah, that's all great advice. I suppose you have to be good at burpees as well, right? You should be able to knock out some
Not
burpees.
anymore.
Is that
anymore.
not still a thing? Because I think
when I first started, the penalty for failing obstacles was something that I think a lot of people know, but it could be either the perfect exercise or perfect hell, which is a burpee, which is. Do you want to describe the burp? I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, so burpees where you just hit the deck. Yeah, you're standing. You get all the way down on your chest. So your chest, hips, knees, feet, you're all the way down on the ground, and then you're back up to full standing. That's typically done explosively. So I jump down onto the ground, and then I explosively push up off the ground with my arms and jump into a standing position. Anybody who's done a bunch of those, probably, like you said, there are a small percentage of people, we call them psychopaths, that like that exercise. Most of us, though, it's not our favorite exercise. But so in my mind, and I think I've seen that in your book as well, but I knew that there's this kind of this penalty system. Is that not still a thing?
Yeah, it used to be. I mean, you just described a single burpee. Now imagine 30, which was the penalty generally for failing an obstacle, and it would just like wear you down. It was really hard, I think, for Spartan to enforce burpees, counting the burpees. I mean, they would have some cameras in the competitive races where people were competing for a podium. Nobody was really monitoring you in the open races where you were running under more congenial circumstances. But so then they switched to penalty laps. So it made it more of a runner's sport, and that if you're good at running, that's going to help you. It took out the burpees. I have mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I think it has probably helped cut down on people who might be inclined to cut corners and cheat, and that's never a good thing in the sport. I think it's easier to monitor and to enforce. But boy, it was a really special, unique type of punishment, and it made you have personal accountability, right? To really say, I am not going to do 29. I always tried to do 31 because I was so scared I'd miscounted at some place, right? Like, I just wanted to make sure I got it in. So I have mixed feelings about it. There are also, as you well know, probably better than I do, some people think burpees are actually bad for your wrists. So that could be another benefit. I've never had wrist problems, but I know that coming down with force on your wrist could do that. So love the burpee, hate the burpee. The burpee is no longer a staple of Spartan racing, at least.
Gotcha. And then another thing I want to talk about, in your book, you do a great job of this, right? In between chapters, I think you have this is the wall. You talk about each of the obstacles, and you talk about how they're a metaphor for life. Do you want to talk about it, just a couple of those that are your favorite? I mean, clearly you might imagine how a wall, and you had described 4, 6, maybe even 8 feet wall that you've got to overcome just to continue, right? Talk about a couple of those obstacles and their sort of metaphorical life lessons.
Yeah, I love that you asked this, and let me just continue on the burpee for one more moment. I want to make sure I didn't misspeak. I actually think in the non-competitive heats of Spartan racing, you may still do burpees, but again, it's kind of a choice of how many you do. It's really in the more competitive heats that they have made penalty loops. The burpee I mentioned is personal accountability. We just talked about that. I think that is really can transfer into any life skill. Like, when you're cutting a corner, when you are not doing the best you could do on a presentation, or how you are treating somebody, or whether you're picking up a piece of trash you see on the street, right? Like, there's just little moments that we know. And I think, to me, the burpees were about personal accountability, and that was very meaningful. The spear throw is kind of a master class in being able to do something and you get one shot, right? Sometimes like people talk about the elevator pitch, right? You get the 30 seconds with the person who's going to be able to give you the funding. Can you actually make that pitch? Can you stand up and convince the room of people during a presentation of your point of view and to sort of fund this project you want to do or to go forward with it? A lot of life does come down to these moments where you get one shot. And the spear throw, you get one shot to throw a spear. I think it's about 25 feet into a rectangular bale of hay and make it stick. And you have to get you're really amped up and you have to get your breathing slowed down and you have to focus how you place your body and you have to, you have to change your entire sort of system to be able to throw that spear, which I'm thinking is like to make that presentation. So to me, the spear throw was, again, like I said, a master class in that. I also, heavy carries, Kevin, seeing people of all body types slugging it out up a mountain with a bucket of rocks or a sandbag on their shoulder, one step in front of the other, cheering each other on, even in the competitive heats, is a really beautiful thing. And, it made me realize that it's in part because heavy carries, everybody's got them in life metaphorically, right? We are all dealing with something, whether it's a divorce or a health issue, or we can't get another job at work, like money. The list is endless. Everybody here is probably listening, is ticking them off in their head. It's all about that. Can you wake up each day and make one step forward to sort of get out of the circumstance that you're in? Can you just keep going and find that willpower to keep going? And so I find heavy carries to be a really beautiful, if incredibly difficult part of obstacle course racing for that reason. Those are a few of them. We can keep talking about them, but I truly found that the obstacles overall were really metaphors for life in many ways. And, we're all going to face obstacles wherever we are. And it's how you approach them, how you learn to pivot and navigate. And when circumstances are changing, for instance, if you approach monkey bars in the morning when the dew is on them and they're slippery, you're going to need a different handhold. You're going to need to know that the person in front of you might have had muddy hands and that they've going to left that on the bar. And so do you change your technique so you have a different grip to be able to get across the monkey bars? Can you make that decision on the fly? That's very different than coming up to monkey bars, which are nice and dry in the sun and you can just swing easily across them. Again, are you adaptable? Can you, in a moment where nothing is going as planned or you're slipping, or can you make an adjustment on the fly? There's a million reasons why we need to be able to do that in our daily lives. And so that's another thing that I think is quite profound about obstacle racing as a sport that just for me personally, I hadn't found to that degree in other sports I've tried, though I'm sure there are metaphors in other sports as well.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. And I love the concept of persevering and overcoming in the face of adversity. And I'll often find, I usually work out in the mornings, and I'll often find that no matter how tough or grueling a day I have, the hardest thing I've done all day has been my workout. And that really sets me up for success. I've already done something that's incredibly difficult. I have this feeling of achievement. I have this confidence that I did that, as well as all the biochemistry and the things happening there with the dopamine and all that fun stuff. But I love the idea of something like Spartan being these obstacles being relatable and carrying over into real life. All right. So Wendy, what do you do to fuel all of this activity? Because what it sounds like is this is an intense amount of activity. How are you fueling all this? What advice would you have for somebody who's considering jumping into this from a nutrition standpoint?
So by fuel, you mean what my food?
Not specifically for races. I mean, just to be fit, healthy, strong, and capable of finishing one of these.
I'm pretty simple, Kevin. Like I am a high protein Mediterranean diet person, right? I do.
Hard to go wrong with that. Yeah.
If it swims or it's got wings, like that's where I tend to get most of my meat protein. I do occasionally eat red meat. I don't not eat it. I try to eat it from the healthiest sources I can find or afford. But I primarily am fish, chicken, and a lot of just, core vegetables and things that you will find, nuts in the Mediterranean diet. I eat a lot of Greek yogurt for the morning. That's my fuel. And I'm much more careful now about alcohol consumption. I do drink occasionally, but I think I have really learned how it impacts my own sleep in particular. I have come to believe with research that there is no amount of alcohol that's actually good for you. That doesn't mean you can't drink and still be okay and be happy. Again, I do have an occasional drink, but like I wear an Oura ring for sleeping. And so I can, right, you got the same one. What happens to your HRV or your resting heart rate if you have one or even two glasses of wine and then go to sleep. So I'm careful about that. I'm also careful just about quantity of food, right, at this age that I eat. When you look at like eating even just a small bag of popcorn, right, even if it doesn't have, and you see it's 110 calories, and then I'll go out and put what I call it's a rucksack, right? It's a weight plate that you put on, and I use that to walk my dog to build leg strength. When I see that it takes me 20 minutes of rucking with a 20 or 30 pound plate to work off one bag of popcorn from calorie, it puts everything in perspective. So I've tried to be judicious about that. So, and I hydrate religiously. There's many wonderful electrolytes that you can use. You can tell me this, how you pronounce it. Is it Nun or Noon? N-U-U-N?
I don't. Yeah, I'm familiar with what you're talking about. I don't know the pronunciation. I've not heard anybody pronounce it. I just see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they can get in touch with me and tell me what's the right answer if I bungled it. But I use electrolyte tablets to just make sure that I am getting enough electrolytes into my system. And I take some very basic supplements that I have discussed with my doctor, things to make sure that I am adequately sourced with vitamin D, with magnesium, with EPA and DHA, which is like fish oil, things of that nature. And I think I am a big believer, particularly with women, but for all of us, that we need to make sure we are getting enough protein. I know there's some, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not prescribing this for anybody, but I try to make sure I get a supplemental protein source during the day, whether it's through a scoop of collagen protein powder in my coffee or eating a venison stick in the middle of the day, just to make sure I'm getting enough.
Yeah, we're big proponents of high protein here, whole food, protein forward diet. And what we tell folks as just in general as a guideline is 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight, whatever that looks like for you, is a really good range to shoot for. What we find is most people that come into the coaching side of our business, what we find is almost all of them, like 95% of them are way below that, considerably lower than that. Even people who will self-report, no, I eat a lot of protein. They say, well, I have, 2 eggs for breakfast and I have a turkey and ham sandwich for dinner, and then I have just a protein, a vegetable, and a starch maybe for dinner, and you add all that up, and it's not a high protein diet.
No, it's not. Yeah. It's pretty hard to get it with just I think it's hard to get it without supplementation, but I never want to be the person. I don't think supplements should be instead of nutrition, right? Correct. I think getting as much of our nutrients as we can from food is the most important thing that we can do, and supplements are there to back you up. I think it's good to check with your physician, to get regular blood tests to make sure you're not, over indexing on a particular supplement, and to just look at your lifestyle, right? And this is in the book, I was diagnosed with melanoma, which is a type of skin cancer. And so I'm very careful about how much sun I have, right? And so, racing really is the time when I allow myself to be outside, and I'm, very covered up with sunscreen for that. But I also then need to get vitamin D. So there's a reason why I'm taking this vitamin D supplementation. So what's the reasoning? Like, if you've got Alzheimer's or cognitive dysfunction in your family, are there things that you can discuss that with your doctor? But again, I'm trying to do everything I can right first by the food that I put into my body and what I drink and don't drink.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So when we talk about supplements, it's exactly that context, right? First and foremost, let's shore up deficiencies, and specifically deficiencies that you've been tested. So you mentioned a few of the really big ones, so the vitamin D, the magnesium, the EPA, the fish oils, things like that are some of the most common, right? And then, in terms of generic, creatine and protein powder seem to be the big ones there. But really, a supplement is exactly that. It's supplemental to a healthy, whole foods based diet. Absolutely love that. But yeah, I think that, and a lot of people might misunderstand what it takes to fuel for performance, because it's different than what it takes to perform, what it takes just to survive or to get by. There's a different strategy when it comes to, I'm fueling specifically to power myself through intense, rigorous physical activity. That looks different than probably what most people our age are eating and consuming today, right?
You're probably eating more, I mean, to some degree, particularly around racing. What I find, honestly, I think I thought I ate healthy, right, in the past. What's been a byproduct of, sort of falling in love with this sport or this pastime is the ripple effect it's had on my being aware of all of these other things about my health, things that I probably might not have paid attention to until it was too late. My glucose, for instance, my glucose regulation. I wear a continuous glucose monitor. I'm pointing to it because it's right here on my arm. I've never been diagnosed as a diabetic. I think some of my levels were teetering at the pre-diabetic level, despite the fact that I thought I was a healthy eater. When I wore this, it really was just an educational tool for me to learn that my issue was when I drink a fruit smoothie, when you blend up the fruit has a much higher impact on your glucose when it's blended and pureed than it does when you just eat it whole. So I really eat my fruit whole now. I learned which carbohydrates jack up my glucose and which don't. All of this, has, as you well know, and again, I'm not a doctor, but this is a very important thing to know for both diabetes and other inflammation and other biological health reasons. So just what I want to say is that by falling in love with this, I've become more cognizant of things and learned about things and paid attention to things with my health that I don't know that I would have. And that's a gift, right? And it's also part of this learning cycle. Like every day there's something new I can learn about the space that you spend your time in, Kevin, right? The health and the wellness space. You don't believe everything. I don't try everything. I'm not particularly interested in hacks and things of that nature, but I am interested in science and I am interested in learning. And that gives you a sense of power and control as you age that you start to feel like you're losing, right? Because you feel like the clock is ticking. There's so much we can't control that's in our genes and our DNA. But what are the choices we can make every day? What are the little choices we can do to give ourselves the edge? There are no guarantees, but I love that feeling of being able to make these small choices. And I think that that's something for anyone who's thinking about starting a new program or really doubling down on something that they already like to do, right? But I think that's one of the things people don't realize, and that, is that it can be, yes, you can start to train because you think you want to get fit or lose weight. But then as you start to become fit, all these other parts of health wrap into it, right? And it can become like this sort of learning journey, and it becomes very exciting. And you're not just sort of waiting for the decline, but you're actually making choices that can help you, right?
And I think there's a couple things there. One is there's this idea of self-experimentation, right? We're all bio-individuals, which is why a lot of fitness advice often doesn't land for us, right? Somebody says intermittent fasting is the best thing that's ever happened. Another person says you have to go keto, and this person says no, vegan is best. This person says carnivore is best, and there's so much conflicting information. But just know that what is best for me, or best for Wendy, or best for your friend at work that had an amazing weight loss transformation doing whatever wacky protocol they did, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be best for you. And I love that idea of self-experimentation, of listening to your body. And that takes practice, right? That's not something most of us are, I think, innately good at, is connecting with our bodies. We become so disconnected from that. And I think that any physical endeavor, and certainly something as intense as Spartan racing, is going to make that connection closer. You're going to learn a lot about yourself. Is that fair?
I think it's fair, and I want to add to it in a couple of ways. I think, one, Spartan racing is intense if you approach it competitively like I do, right? I am now at this point in my Spartan racing, obstacle racing journey career, I am endeavoring to place, right? I am endeavoring to be in the top 3. I am trying to win the race. That can make it very intense. There are thousands and thousands of people who go out and do these races across the world, and they're just going out to do it and get through it with their friends and have fun, but also do something that's pushing their limits. And that's a wonderful thing, right? Like, you can get healthy by doing that, and you can get healthy by doing what I'm doing, whatever it is that fits into the journey of your own life. So I agree with you on that personalization part of it. I think, you and I talked a little bit prior to this about making choices and small decisions. There's so much that's out of our control, Kevin, about our own health, whether it's our DNA, our genes, but what are the small choices you can make every day that give you power as you age to at least say, I'm doing my part. And I have found that the ripple effect for me on thinking about my own health in ways beyond just getting fit has been substantial by going on this journey. And in a world where you sometimes think like, ugh, the sand in my hourglass is probably at least half empty at this point, right? What's the point? You take some control back by doing that. That is an incredibly powerful thing that I want to underscore for people. The last thing I want to say is, and we touched upon this a little bit, is it can be really easy to think I have to find this diet, or I need this gadget, or this hack, or this thing. Like, that in itself can be a distraction, right? What's really essential is finding something that you like to do, that you are motivated enough to, as we said, to go to bed a little bit earlier, to forgo that second glass of wine or wine at all, to get up early in the morning and to stick with it, and that makes you want to learn, that makes you want to Google and read books and listen to podcasts. Like, that is a good indicator. If you're amassing so many quick fixes, I think you're taking up all the time that you would have to actually dedicate to learning something new and hard. So for me, I'm a little bit, it's not that I don't want things that are going to make my life easier. I'm not that crazy, but I also think I'm not really pro hack. I'm not pro shortcut. I think there's a lot of beauty in the long road of learning something hard and new, and that you're going to know at the end of the day, like, you'll know what that's done for you. So I just would encourage people to, again, not buy into too much hype that's out there, right? Not to think that this hack or this thing is going to be the thing that's going to make me healthy, but really address the fundamentals, which I know that you talk a lot about on your show.
Yes, we do. Yeah, that's very, very well said. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it for now. And folks, if you're inspired to go out and train for your first OCR or Spartan race or Tough Mudder, let us know. I'd love to know that. I'd love to know if you were inspired by the story. Certainly I am. And if I end up doing this, I'll let you guys know as well. I'll share that journey with you. All right. Well, Wendy, we know the book, Not Too Late, The Power of Pushing Limits at Any Age, is available now for pre-order. When's this thing going to ship? When can people expect to get a copy of that?
June 18th. I'm available for pre-order now. And actually, if you do pre-order the book, there's some special bonuses going on that you can find at my website, GwendolynBounds.com, both getting a special workout that's been a workout from anywhere. So there's a no excuses workout created by my coaches, who are incredible, for people who pre-order the book, along with some discounts on personalized coaching and some discounts on gear. So people can check that out. And as you said, when will the book be out? It'll be out June 18th, but it's available for pre-order at everybody, all retailers now.
Okay, so by the time this goes live, I think that is going to be available. Folks, you can find that wherever you buy books. And the website is GwendolynBounds.com. Is that correct?
Correct.
Gotcha. You can find all the info there. And folks, I will put all of Wendy's contact information, all her socials, all that fun stuff, as well as a link to the book in the show notes. You guys can find that there. Wendy, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing your incredible journey with us, your insights, your knowledge, your wisdom, and most of all, your passion for this. Absolutely love your story. I think that book is brilliant, and I encourage everybody to get a copy of it. But thanks so much for coming on the show and being willing to share with us today.
Thanks for what you're doing, bringing people into the world of movement and wellness and health, and helping everybody get out of this competency trap. I appreciate it, Kevin. It's been fun to talk to you.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I want to let you know that we have other free resources over at silveredgefree.com. There you'll find our free guides with our top tips on nutrition, exercise, and healthy lifestyle to assist you in your weight loss and fitness journey. So feel free to head over there and download anything that looks useful to you. I'll put links to everything we talked about in the show notes. You folks can find those over at silveredgefitness.com/287. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and you podcast folks to please give this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.